Well, I should have said the Globe. I should have said the Globe is the Globe and Mail. You would have seen that from the thumbnail. The Globe and Mail is Canada's national newspaper, so it's similar to doing the best of this from the New York Times, for example, but for Canada. Hi everyone, it's me, Jess. I have a little bit of a rambunctious dog running around, so we'll see how this video goes. Listen, everyone, it's here. It's here. I actually bought the physical paper because it's the Globe 100. I'm gonna go through the list. I'm only gonna look at fiction because that's my jam. We have 15 international titles and 25 Canadian titles, which is fantastic because we're going to look at some Canadian books on their top 100. This is a list that's compiled by editors and reviewers at the Globe and Mail. 10 contributors. Let's take a gander and see what we think of this list. Obviously, I haven't read everything on the list. There are some books on these lists that I've not even heard of, so that's very exciting. I also noticed that there are some books that are omitted, missing, that are absolutely going to be on my top 10 best books of the year. The Bee Sting, anyone? Yeah, The Bee Sting is not on this list. This list of 15 international fiction books does not have The Bee Sting, and I'm a little dismayed. That's a rant for another day. Let's go through them. I also pulled from my shelves the books that I actually own that I've been meaning to read that are on this list. But I'm just going to go through them in the order that they're presented in the newspaper. The first one I have heard of and I was a bit curious about. It's called August Blue by Deborah Levy. The story of a woman who is a piano virtuoso, Elsa M. Anderson. And the summary says she has a breakdown, she walks off the stage, leaves the concert hall, and goes from Vienna to Athens, and now she finds herself in Athens trying to figure out a new identity, but she also seems to be being followed by a doppelganger. Well, that sounds really good to me. Chain Gang All-Stars is here. I haven't gotten to Chain Gang All-Stars. Just to say, I did try to read it. I started it and I wasn't enjoying it that much, so I put it aside for other things. I do know a lot of people are going to have it on their 10 best of the years for sure, because a lot of people have been raving about Chain Gang All-Stars, but for whatever reason, it just wasn't for me either at the time that I was reading it, or maybe it's just not for me at all. I might go back to it. It's a debut novel by Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenya. It's a dystopian novel about the prison system and prisoners fighting for survival. Gladiator-style fights sponsored by big companies. So I'm sure that it's got a lot to say, and I feel like at the right moment it probably would be a good book for me. It would be my kind of book, but I just wasn't in the mood when I picked it up. How to Build a Boat. So How to Build a Boat I have. How to Build a Boat was on the long list for the Booker, and it was highly recommended by Scott, and I always take his recommendations seriously, by Elaine Feeney. This is the story of a boy who has, he's neurodiverse, and he's in school, and he actually, with a teacher, begins to build a boat. I think he lost his mother, and this is a way for him to kind of process some of that loss and some of that experience. So I do want to read this. I do have it on my radar, and it's on my physical shelf. Irish novelist as well. Kairos by Jenny Erpenbeck. This has been on the Globe and Mail's list before. I think there's someone there who absolutely adores this book, clearly. Translated from German by Michael Hoffman. This exceptional novel tells the story of a May-December affair in the dying days of East Germany, with the Berlin Wall still intact. Katharina, 19, meets Hans, a married novelist in his 50s. So I had wanted to read this as well, but didn't get to it. I don't own a copy. I would take it out of the library if I was going to read it. Prophet Song, which frankly just came out here in Canada. It just won the Booker. Paul Lynch is an Irish novelist, and it's the story about, I think it's a futuristic dystopian story about the power of systems and bureaucracies and the inability for the people involved in the story to get out from under the system. That sounds Kafka-esque. Eilish Stack answers her front door one day to find two officers from Ireland's newly formed secret police wanting to interrogate her husband, a trade unionist. And that's all it says. So I've heard it's pretty brutal, actually. I've heard there are parts of it that are pretty rough. Restless, Dolly, Maunder. Maunder, Restless Dolly Maunder, I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly, by Kate Grenville. The Booker shortlisted author returns with a fictionalized account of her grandmother's life, which began at the end of the 19th century. Growing up in a poor farming family in rural New South Wales, Dolly spends her life doggedly searching for love and independence. I hadn't heard of that one. It sounds a little meh. I don't know. Maybe it's really good, but that description doesn't tell me anything super exciting. Covenant of Water, which I've heard really great things about and I'm sure is going to be on other lists. This novel follows, it's a generational saga. It follows the close-knit family of a former doctor from Kerala, India, who still has a clinical practice and is a professor of medicine at Stanford Medical School. He starts doing work with a young girl, and it follows the story from the 1900s to the 1970s, and there's a shocking discovery. Fraud by Zadie Smith, which I've already read. I will leave a link in the description box below to my review of The Fraud. Fraud follows Eliza Touchette, who is a housekeeper for a novelist, and there are depictions of Charles Dickens and other novelists in the time of abolition, and it follows the real-life trials of a man who claimed to be someone who he was not, an heir to a fortune. I mean, it wasn't my favorite, one of my favorites of the year, but it had a lot to offer. I enjoyed reading it. The Iliad. So this is a translation by Emily Wilson. I feel like that's maybe unusual to have on a best of list because, I don't know, is that a cheat? A translation of the Odyssey. It was the first translation by a woman and apparently was a tour de force. So I like that. That's cool. The Maniac, which I've seen on some other lists. It says, spanning most of the past century, the Chilean writer's stunning novel presents a triptych about three real scientific prodigies whose gifts lead them down the path to madness. This actually sounds really interesting. The Postcard. Definitely seen The Postcard promoted in bookstores. I haven't heard that many people talking about it. It's a fictionalized version of a true story. It's about a postcard that arrives at the Paris home of the main character's mother, Layla. Other than the address, the postcard is inscribed with only 4 names. Layla's maternal grandparents, young aunt and uncle, all of whom were murdered at Auschwitz. Who sent the postcard and why? This autobiographical mystery, translated from the French by Tina Cofer, is a page-turner. That actually sounds really good. Tom Lake by Ann Patchett, which I do own because I'm a fan of Ann Patchett, but I haven't read it yet. I heard this is very Chekhovian. It's a gentle tale of 3 daughters living with their mother on a cherry orchard during the pandemic. So I guess it's about the sisters coming together during lockdown to work the farm. And I think they find out that their mother has an obsession or maybe has a past with an actor or something like that. I do want to read this. I know I will like that one. Victory City by Salman Rushdie. We're actually reading a Salman Rushdie book for my book club. I'm not sure about Salman Rushdie. It's the first book that he's written since the attack on his life. And this one, it says, styles itself as a translation from Sanskrit, of an epic poem from the 14th century. This poem tells the 250-year-long haunting tale of the rise and fall of the city now called Hampi. White Cat, Black Dog, a series of wonderfully strange and funny retellings of classic fairy tales and lore. That sounds fun. And then Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. Haven't read it, haven't picked it up. I've heard people say good things about it, despite how commercial it is. If you don't know already, it's a satirical thriller that takes on the commercial publishing industry as stymied author June steals the manuscript of her friend Athena, who died in a freak accident. The pilfered novel becomes more popular, and as that happens, the lies pile up and pile up and pile up. I mean, I might pick that up. That seems like it would be fun. There's just so many books, and as we all know, not very much time. So those are the international books on the Globe 100. Now we're going to get into Canadian fiction, which is very exciting, actually. There are 25 titles on the list. The first one is one that I've not heard of, A History of Burning by Janika Oza. Blurb says, this sprawling debut, shortlisted for the Governor-General's Award for Fiction, takes place in India, Uganda, England, and Canada, and looks at the lives of one family, including 3 sisters who are displaced from the place they call home. This is an epic tale of memory, family, and belonging that confronts notions of identity. What does it mean to be Indian when one is part of the diaspora? Breaking and Entering by Dawn Gillmor. Also have not heard of this one. It's apparently a hilarious and devastating look at upwardly mobile urban Toronto midlife. Bea, A recent empty nester and unenthusiastic commercial gallerist takes up a new hobby. Unbeknownst to her professor husband, oh, this sounds good, lockpicking. This sounds good. I'm excited. First I hear of this book. In the sweltering heat of her assisted living facility, Bea's mother is also fading with dementia. Oh, another dementia storyline. I don't know if I can take it. Under soaring temperatures, the future is under threat for this couple, their sandwich generation friends, and the planet. Okay, that sounds like a lot in one package, but I do like the lockpicking idea. Daughter by Claudia Rey. I did talk about this one already because it was on another list from the Globe and Mail for fall reads. This explores a gender dynamic and family dynamics through the story of Mona, who is a playwright, an occasional muse to her philandering, manipulative novelist father, Paul. Sounds like that one might be a little disturbing, but could be quite good nonetheless. And then I was really happy to see this one on the list because I actually have a copy, and I went to the author's launch, this new book by Shawn Michaels called Do You Remember Being Born? It's about a woman who is a writer who has been asked to use artificial intelligence. Very witty, it's very compassionate. He tries to make a counterpoint. What if AI could be wielded as a tool instead of feared as a foe? Oh, I feel like that's kind of dangerous territory though, but we would certainly have a lot to talk about if you read this book for a book club. Or maybe I'm going to suggest it for mine. This one I've not heard of, And Then She Fell. It's a debut novel by Alicia Elliott. It's about an Indigenous woman, a new mother who lives in a wealthy Toronto neighborhood. Alice is intent on rewriting her creation story, but as time passes in the home she shares with her husband Steve, she begins to lose track of time, her identity, and whether she's writing the creation story or if it's writing her. Oh, interesting. Are You Willing to Die for the Cause by Chris Oliveros. This is actually published by Drawn and Quarterly, which is a publishing house here in Montreal, investigating the birth of the militant separatist group and the beginning of one of the country's most challenging historical periods. It looks at the FLQ. I think that would be really interesting. Birnam Wood by Eleanor Catton. I have read Birnam Wood. I read it early in the year this year and I really, really liked it. I'll leave a link to my review of it down below. I thought it was fantastic. The blurb here, if you want to know more about it beyond the blurb, you can go and check out my review. But the blurb here says, a sparkling work of fiction where the titular group of radical environmentalists butt heads with an irascible billionaire, material that could otherwise browbeat. Catton has produced a literary wonder that spans time and genre. And I will say that it's quite an adventure, this book. Yeah, if you haven't gotten to it yet, I really recommend. It's definitely going to be on my top 10. Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. This is something I've not heard of by Heather Fawcett. It says it's a charming story about a Cambridge professor's attempt to compile the first complete encyclopedia of fairies. Brings a bit of literary sophistication to the fantasy genre. Fantasy genre is not really something that I read very much of, but I could see that that might be kind of fun. And the next few I have not heard of. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to read the little blurbs because I haven't heard of them, so I don't really know very much about them. The Full Moon Whaling Chronicles. The first thing to know about Guriel's 2023 book. Did I say by Jason Guriel? It's a novel written in rhyming couplets. The second thing to know is that it's about whalers who are also werewolves. This is quite imaginative, innovative, and unlike anything else published this year. That sounds, I don't know if that sounds intriguing or off-putting. I don't know if it's just the blurb. Sometimes the blurb for these is not great because it's small. Instructions for the Drowning by Stephen Heighton. So this was released posthumously. It's a short story collection where all 11 short stories have a profound examination of the human condition, held by Ann Michaels, spanning generations and beginning in France during the First World War. Michaels looks at how trauma is carried and transferred through generations in a novel whose prose carries hints of her talents as a poet. I have seen this in bookstores. The next one I have heard of, In the Upper Country. I think a lot of people were wondering why In the Upper Country was not included in the Giller long list, and I think that's completely fair, even though I haven't read it yet, just because the topic sounds like it would be really, really good, and I've heard really good things about it, and it was shortlisted for the Governor General's Award for Fiction and a bunch of other awards. It's a story about two Black women, Lancinda and Cash, who settled in Canada during the 18th century in communities that were the last stop on the Underground Railroad. And I do really want to read this one in the new year. The next one is a historical fiction by Emma Donoghue, learned by heart. It's about a love affair between Anne Lister and Eliza Rain. It's a fictional retelling of Anne Lister's story, who is known as being like the first modern lesbian. Moon of the Turning Leaves by Wap Gashigris. hope I'm saying the name right. The sequel to Moon of the Crusted Snow. So clearly I don't know the author. Explores survival, indigeneity, and resilience in a post-apocalyptic landscape. That doesn't sound scary at all. Rice flips the script on the end of the world lit. Rather than turning on one another, the indigenous community he focused on here only grows stronger. Oh, actually, that sounds amazing. Yeah, because I thought it was going to be dark at first, but it actually sounds really not dark. Margaret Atwood's latest book, Old Babes in the Wood, is on here. It's actually a short story collection. I forgot I have another book on this list. The girl with too many books that she hasn't read yet. And that she's not going to read before the end of the year. That would be me. They're going to be on my best read list for next year. Really good, actually, by Monica Heisey. I picked this one up because I heard it was really funny. She's one of the writers from the show Schitt's Creek, which is a very popular Canadian comedy show. This is about sort of everything's going wrong for this woman, and it's supposed to be very, very funny. She's a young woman. She's just been divorced, and it's set. I think it's just about a woman whose kind of life is kind of falling apart, and it's very comedic. So that would be a fun read. That would also be a very good fun book club read. I think we're giving you good lists for your future book club pick. Another graphic novel on this list from Drawn and Quarterly, written by cousins Julian Tamaki and Mariko Tamaki. It's their first collaboration in more than a decade. It's a graphic novel that follows 3 young university students during a trip to New York. Oh, this sounds good. I don't really read graphic novels, and I'm wondering if I should really start, because some of these graphic novels sound really good. An exploration of how quickly the dynamics of friendship and romance can shift in your early 20s that acknowledges the necessary messiness of young adulthood without judgment. Sounds really good. Study for Obedience. So Study for Obedience won the Gillmor Prize this year. I just finished reading it, but I haven't talked about it in a wrap-up yet because I have to do my November wrap-up. Don't worry, that video is coming. Our protagonist is an unnamed woman who goes to live with her brother in a remote community. It's really an exploration of the concept of obedience. It was a fascinating book. It's very difficult to explain in a short blurb. I don't know what they say about it here. It just says, unsettling, beguiling, frustrating. We're never quite sure where or when we are, and yet there's something that holds our attention. Perhaps it's sentences like these. I was the youngest child and the youngest of many more than I care to remember. I will talk about it in my wrap-up. I thought it was great. Don't get me wrong. I thought it was great. But this is not a novel with a typical narrative. This is a novel that will make you think, it will make you pause. You will have to want to read it more than once. It's that kind of a book. It's a literary prize-winning book. Get my drift. Sarah Bernstein's from Montreal originally, but living in Scotland now. The Adult. I've seen this in stores and been curious about it, by Bronwyn Fisher. It's a coming-of-age queer romance that centers on Natalie, a university freshman new to Toronto who begins a love affair with Nora, a much older woman. The Adversary by Michael Crummy. Oh, so Michael Crummy's book, The Innocents, I just talked about it in my last vlog, Newfoundland writer, is up for Canada Reads, but this must be a newer book of his. Weird. Okay. I think this is a sign that I have to read his book. In 18th century Newfoundland, a failed marriage leads to 2 siblings escalating a decades-old rivalry as their fellow townsfolk become collateral in their struggle for power. Oh, this sounds really good. This sounds like more evocative than this to me. Interesting. Clarion by Nina Dunick. I did talk about this when I was looking at the books that were longlisted for the Gillmor. It's about brother and sister going from different points of view between the brother and the sister, and Peter, he plays the trumpet. He has an audition for a gig at a local restaurant, and Stasi deals with the aftermath of losing the corporate promotion that should have been hers. It's a debut novel. Also from the Gillmor shortlist, The Islands by Dion Irving. That's a collection of short stories that looks at the trajectories of Jamaican women as they explore their colonial pasts. That sounds really interesting. I didn't get to it, but I would like to read The Islands. The Librarianist by Patrick DeWitt. I've also seen this one around and heard a few people talking about it. Not super exciting reviews of this one. It's about an unassuming Bob Comet who is a librarian. The librarian in the title. Its quiet life on the sidelines has hidden a past filled with adventure, turmoil, and love. I mean, it sounds like it could be good. I don't know because I haven't heard from anyone who's read it. By the way, let me know in the comments below if you've read any of these, if you're excited to read any of these, if any of these would be on your top list of the year. If you could do 25, that would be a luxury, wouldn't it? We always do 10 here on BookTube. The Whispers by Ashley. Oh, I have this book too. A little surprised at myself at how many books I have that are on this list. So I have this book as well. The Whispers by Ashley O'Drain. I haven't read her first book, but I have it. I haven't read her first book, but I also own it. I've just, The Push, I just was really interested in the idea of The Push, and then I never got a chance to read it, and then she came out with this book, and I picked it up because I do have a book buying problem. This is a skillful examination of the guilt, pressure, and impossible standards that accompany motherhood. So she does explore a lot motherhood, but this one focuses on the rumors, neighborhood whispers. A dog's a young mother after her son ends up in the hospital months after a public argument. So I do think that her books are thriller-like, but deal with complex social issues as well. Maybe I'm giving it too much credit. Let me know if you've read this one. I think Jules DeLever read this one. I think she mentioned that in one of my videos where I talked about it in a haul. So this is the last one of the 25. Yara, which I've never heard of before, by Tamara Faith Berger. Yara is a Brazilian teenager, and she's sent to Israel on a birthright roots trip by her mother, who is desperate to separate her daughter from her much older girlfriend, a nurse who Yara met when she was getting a nose job. This sounds really good. The trip offers escape from her controlling partner, but it is not a good fit. Further escape will be necessary. Intriguing. So, and there are some other books on the nonfiction list as well. I haven't been big into nonfiction. I think of the books that I really want to read in nonfiction that have come out this year that are really, really great that people are talking about. I think the one that I most want to read is Page Boy by Elliot Page. That one I've been meaning to get to for so long and just haven't. So it's going to be a priority for me in the new year. Obviously, there are some books that are missing. I don't know. I already talked about The Bee Sting. Fane. What the Heck? Definitely some books missing from that list, and definitely curious as to why. Definitely books missing from that list that I'm a bit surprised aren't there. Just finished Katharina Vermette's The Break. So her new book, The Circle, wasn't there. Break was fantastic. You can check out my reading vlog for that. It's most recent reading vlog. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Let me know how this compares to other lists that you've seen on BookTube as you've been watching. This is the time of year for the best of lists to be coming out. I'm very excited for all of the lists that I'm going to be seeing, not just by media outlets, but by us BookTubers. It's going to be really fun. It's such a fun time of year. So stay tuned. If you like this video and you want to see more videos like this, make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you hit the thumbs up button, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. Bye! Focused. That doesn't really surprise me. Explores survival, indigeneity, and resilience. Don't let you show what is the TV show called? The popular TV show. Video. Schitt's Creek. I knew it was Creek something. Okay. I'll give you a treat. I'll give you a treat. I can't eat ornaments, Mama. I'll give you a treat.